A canine's fierce barks shatter a courtroom, exposing a corrupt cop's deadly plot. Will truth prevail? Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to catch our latest heart-pounding tales. A guttural roar shattered the courtroom's suffocating silence, drowning the judge's final words as Rex, a grizzled canine German shepherd, tore free from his handler's leash, his barks a seismic eruption, his massive frame lunging toward the prosecutor's mahogany desk, where Richard Langley, in a tailored suit, stumbled back, his briefcase crashing to the floor, papers flying like startled birds. Ethan Cole, shackled in an orange jumpsuit, his face carved with 2 years of anguish, jolted upright, his chains rattling, his breath catching at the sight of Rex, his partner, his confidant, now retired, his once sleek fur dulled by time, but his amber eyes blazing with a ferocity that cut through the haze of Ethan's despair. Once a revered officer, Ethan had been branded a killer, accused of gunning down a civilian and twisting Rex into a weapon, a lie that stripped him of his badge, his honor, and his freedom, leaving him to rot in a cell while the world moved on. This courtroom, with its polished wood and sterile light, was his last stand, the appeal his final flicker of hope. But the gavel's shadow loomed, ready to bury him in a life sentence. Rex's presence, permitted as a cruel farewell, was meant to be a quiet goodbye. Yet here he was, a tempest of teeth and claws, his growls pinning Langley against his chair, the prosecutor's composure fracturing, his voice shrill as he shouted, "Control that animal!" The gallery erupted, spectators leaning forward, reporters scribbling, the judge's gavel pounding like a heartbeat. But Ethan's world narrowed to Rex, whose fury shifted, his massive head swinging toward the witness stand, where a man, thin, jittery, his suit ill-fitting, introduced as a bystander from that fateful night, shrank back, his eyes wide, his fingers clutching the chair's armrests as if bracing for impact. Rex's barks intensified, echoing off the walls, and Ethan's pulse surged, his instincts screaming that this was no random outburst. Rex knew something, felt something, the same way he'd sensed danger in 100 raids, 100 chases, his nose sharper than any lie detector. The handler yanked Rex's leash, but the dog's collar caught on the witness's chair, a metallic snap ringing out as a tiny object, a memory card, no bigger than a thumbnail, tumbled free, skittering across the polished floor, its glint a beacon in the chaos. Ethan's voice, raw and desperate, broke through. "There! Grab it!" A bailiff lunged, scooping the card before it vanished under a table, and the room held its breath. All eyes on the judge, her stern face tightening, her glasses glinting as she demanded, "What is this? Examine it! Now!" Ethan's heart thundered, his chained hands trembling, his mind racing with questions. Where had the card come from? Why was it in Rex's collar? Who had placed it there? The prosecutor's face paled, his hands fumbling with his tie, his glance darting to the witness, whose sweat-slicked brow betrayed a terror beyond the dog's snarls. A clerk hurried in with a laptop, the card slotted into a port, and as the screen flickered, a video loaded, its grainy footage casting a hush over the courtroom, the air so thick Ethan could barely breathe. It was the alley, June 12, 2023, the night that stole his life, a civilian, young, unarmed, crumpling to the ground, blood pooling. But the shooter wasn't Ethan, his gun still holstered, his hands raised in shock. It was James Vaughn, Ethan's captain, his face cold, his badge catching the streetlight as he fired once, then knelt, planting Ethan's service weapon beside the body, his radio call calm, calculated. "Officer down, suspect neutralized." Vaughn's figure turned, his eyes meeting the camera, a hidden lens, perhaps a body cam, perhaps something else, and his smirk was a knife in Ethan's gut, a confirmation of betrayal Ethan had suspected but couldn't prove. The courtroom exploded, spectators shouting, a woman in the gallery sobbing, the judge's gavel useless against the tide of outrage. Langley stammered, "This is inadmissible," but his voice cracked, his authority crumbling. And the witness bolted upright, his chair toppling, his cry, "That's fake!" drowned by the crowd's roar. Ethan's knees gave way, his body sinking into the defendant's chair, tears streaming down his face. Not for himself, but for Rex, who'd carried this truth through 2 years of separation, hidden in his collar. A secret Ethan had been too broken to seek. The judge's voice sliced through, sharp and commanding. "Arrest Captain James Vaughn immediately. Detain the witness for perjury." Officers surged, cuffing the witness, whose eyes locked on Ethan, not with fear, but with a chilling defiance, as if daring him to dig deeper. Langley's retreat was frantic, his briefcase clutched like a shield. But Ethan caught the glance he shot the witness, a shared panic that screamed of a larger conspiracy. Rex, finally calming, trotted to Ethan's side, his warm bulk pressing against Ethan's leg, his low whine a balm to the storm in Ethan's chest. The bailiff unlocked Ethan's chains, the metal clanking to the floor, and the judge's words, "Conviction overturned, immediate release," were a lifeline. But they came with a weight Ethan couldn't shake. Reporters swarmed outside, their shouts a dull roar. But Ethan knelt, his hands buried in Rex's fur, whispering, "You never quit, boy." His voice breaking as he realized the card's existence meant someone had known the truth, someone who'd let him suffer, who'd used Rex as a pawn. The witness, now in cuffs, was hustled past, his glare cutting through Ethan, and Langley's hurried exit, his phone pressed to his ear, sparked a fire in Ethan's gut. Rex's growl rumbled, his ears pricked, his gaze fixed on the courtroom doors, where a figure lingered in the shadows, too still, too deliberate, before slipping away. Ethan stood, his legs unsteady, his freedom a fragile thing, laced with the certainty that Vaughn was a key bug, not the machine, and the memory card was a door to a truth far darker than one man's betrayal. As he stepped toward the exit, Rex at his side, the weight of 2 lost years settled into a vow. He'd walk away from the badge, but not from the fight. And with Rex's instincts guiding him, he'd hunt the shadows that had stolen his life. The alley was a jagged scar through the city's underbelly, its walls slick with rain, the air heavy with the sour tang of garbage and desperation. But for Ethan Cole, that night, June 12, 2023, was a wound that bled into every moment of the 2 years that followed. A night when trust turned to ash and a single gunshot rewrote his life. He crouched behind a rusted dumpster, his breath shallow, his service weapon drawn but steady. Rex at his side, the K9 German Shepherd's ears pricked, his low growl vibrating through the damp pavement as they tracked a reported armed robbery. The suspect last seen fleeing into this labyrinth of backstreets. Ethan's radio crackled. Dispatch's voice clipped with urgency, but his focus was on Rex, whose nose twitched, catching scents no human could. Their bond a steel thread forged through countless operations, a partnership Ethan believed unbreakable. Footsteps pounded, erratic, and a figure stumbled into the alley, a young man, barely 20. His hoodie torn, a knife glinting in his trembling hand, his eyes wild, shouting, "I ain't done nothing." Ethan rose, his voice calm but commanding. "Drop the knife, now." But the man froze, his gaze flicking past Ethan toward the alley's mouth, where another figure emerged, Captain James Vaughn, Ethan's commanding officer, his silhouette sharp against the flickering streetlight, his gun already raised, his face unreadable. "Cole, stand down," Vaughn snapped, but something in his tone, too smooth, too practiced, sent a chill through Ethan, and Rex's growl sharpened, his hackles rising, his body tensing, not at the suspect but at Vaughn, a reaction Ethan had never seen in their 7 years together. Before he could process it, a shot exploded, the sound of physical blow, and the young man collapsed, blood pooling beneath him, his knife skittering into a puddle, his eyes wide, lifeless. Ethan's gun was still in his hand, unfired, his mind reeling as he shouted, "Who shot?" But Vaughn was already moving, holstering his weapon, his radio crackling as he called, "Officer involved shooting. Suspect down. Cole's weapon." Ethan's blood ran cold, his eyes darting to the body, a civilian, not the robber, unarmed but for a cheap blade, and then to Vaughn, who knelt, his gloved hand slipping Ethan's spare gun, kept in his ankle holster, beside the body, his movements precise, deliberate. "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan choked, stepping forward, but Vaughn's eyes met his, cold, unyielding, his whisper a blade, "Say nothing, Cole, or you're done." Rex lunged, barking ferociously, teeth snapping inches from Vaughn's leg. But a shout from behind stopped Ethan's heart. Mark Hensley, his partner, his friend of 5 years, the man who'd stood at his wedding, who'd saved his life in a drug bust, emerged from the shadows, his face pale but his voice steady. "I saw it, Captain. Ethan fired first." The words were a gut punch, and Ethan staggered, his voice raw. "Mark, you know that's a lie." But Mark's eyes slid away, his jaw tight, his silence louder than the sirens now screaming closer. Officers swarmed, their faces a blur of shock and accusation, their hands rough as they cuffed Ethan, his protest drowned by Vaughn's calm narrative. Cole lost control, the dogs trained to attack on his cue. Rex's barks turned frantic, his body straining against a handler's grip, but they muzzled him, dragging him away, his whines piercing Ethan's soul as he was shoved into a squad car. The alley's neon glow fading, replaced by the precinct's harsh fluorescence. The setup was a masterclass in betrayal. Vaughn's report painted Ethan as a reckless killer. Mark's testimony, delivered with downcast eyes, cemented it, and doctored body cam footage showed Ethan's gun in hand, though he swore it never left his grip. Witnesses materialized, their stories rehearsed, claiming Ethan had a history of aggression, and Rex was branded a liability. Stripped of duty, sent to a facility Ethan couldn't trace. The trial was a farce, Vaughn's polished lies and Mark's quiet betrayal burying Ethan under a guilty verdict. Life without parole. His name smeared across every newsstand. Rogue cop kills innocent man. In his cell, Ethan replayed that night. The way Vaughn's smirk mirrored the one in the courtroom video Rex had revealed. The way Mark's hands shook as he lied. The way Rex had growled not at the civilian but at Vaughn, as if he'd smelled the rot of treachery. He remembered a late-night talk, weeks before, when Mark had muttered about Vaughn's meetings, shadowy figures in unmarked cars. But Ethan had laughed it off, trusting his captain, his friend, blind to the noose tightening around him. Now, alone. The pieces clicked. Vaughn was a pawn. Mark was bought. And the civilian's death was no accident, but a message. A sacrifice to silence Ethan. Though for what, he didn't know. His fists clenched, his knuckles bruising against the cell wall. But Rex's memory, his loyalty, his instincts, kept Ethan fighting, whispering that the truth was out there, waiting for them to reclaim it. As the prison bars clanged shut each night, Ethan vowed to find Rex, to unravel the web that had stolen their lives, knowing that alley was just the opening shot in a war he hadn't seen coming. The prison cell was a concrete tomb, its walls stained with despair, the air thick with the stench of sweat and bleach. And for Ethan Cole, each night was a battle to keep his sanity, the memory of that alley gunshot and Rex's desperate barks haunting him like ghosts that refused to fade. 2 years had passed since the trial, since James Vaughn's betrayal and Mark Hensley's lies stripped him of everything, his badge, his freedom, his name, branding him a cop-turned-killer, a pariah even among the inmates who shared this hell. Ethan sat on his bunk, his knuckles scarred from fights he didn't start, his eyes hollow but sharp, scanning the shadows beyond the bars, where the clank of gates and the murmur of guards were constant reminders of his cage. The other prisoners, hardened men with grudges against cops, saw Ethan as a trophy, their taunts escalating to shivs drawn in the yard, their attacks orchestrated, as if someone on the outside wanted him silenced. He'd survived 3 ambushes, his body bruised but unbroken, his training keeping him alive. But each scar was a question. Who was paying them? And why was he still a target? The answer came in fragments, slipped into his cell like contraband, a series of anonymous notes, scrawled in jagged ink, tucked inside a library book or under his tray. The first read, "Vaughn's a puppet. Look higher." Ethan's pulse quickened, his fingers tracing the words, the paper trembling in his hands as he hid it beneath his mattress, his mind racing back to the alley, to Vaughn's cold smirk, to Mark's averted eyes. The notes kept coming, each one a breadcrumb. They own the precinct. The dog's not at a farm. Trust no one. The last one chilled him most, hinting that Rex, his canine partner, hadn't been sent to a quiet retirement, but to a facility, a place where his instincts were being dulled, or worse, weaponized. Ethan's chest tightened, his fists clenching at the thought of Rex, loyal, fierce, the only soul who'd never doubted him, caged like he was, suffering for the same truth Ethan had failed to prove. He couldn't reach Rex, couldn't call out, but the notes were a lifeline, proof that someone, somewhere, knew he was innocent, and Ethan clung to them, risking beatings to keep them hidden, his hope a fragile flame in the prison's endless night. The guards were no allies, their eyes cold, their searches too thorough, and Ethan learned to move like a ghost, trading favors for scraps of information, a smuggled pencil, a whispered rumor about Vaughn's rise to deputy chief, his new suits and sudden wealth. One guard, a grizzled veteran named Torres, seemed different, his glances lingering, his voice low when he muttered, "You're not the only one they've burned," before slipping Ethan a torn page with the name, Argent. It was a code, a company, or a person, Ethan didn't know, but it was a thread, and he pulled, piecing together whispers from inmates about a shadow group, a network that bought cops, judges, even wardens. Their reach explaining why Ethan's appeals were buried, why his lawyer vanished after a single visit. Argent was tied to Vaughn, the notes suggested, and Ethan's dreams turned to Rex, imagining him in a sterile lab, his growls silenced, or worse, turned against innocence. He had to find him, had to expose Vaughn, but the prison was a fortress, its walls alive with eyes and ears. Ethan's only weapon was patience. His nights spent memorizing the notes, burning their words into his mind, his days navigating the yard's politics, dodging shivs while trading cigarettes for secrets. A lifer named Rico, a former smuggler, hinted at a facility north of the city, a place where they break dogs like they break men. And Ethan's heart sank, his resolve hardening. He'd get to Rex, even if it meant breaking out, even if it cost him everything. The attacks grew bolder, a blade grazing his ribs in the mess hall, a fist slamming his skull in the showers, each one a message. Stop digging. But Ethan didn't stop. His anger a fire that burned hotter with every bruise, every note, every thought of Rex. He wrote back, scratching questions on scraps of paper, slipping them into the library's return bin, hoping his unseen ally would answer. "Where's Rex? Who's Argent?" The replies were slow, cryptic. Patience. They're watching. But they kept Huss alive, kept him fighting, even as the prison's walls seemed to close in, the guards' searches more frequent, their batons heavier. Torres, the one guard he half trusted, warned him one night, his voice a hiss, "They know you're asking questions. Back off, or you're dead." Ethan didn't back off. Couldn't. Not when Rex was out there. Not when Vaughn walked free. His betrayal a poison that infected everything Ethan had believed in. The final note came on the eve of his appeal. Slipped into his shoe, its words a jolt. Rex carries the truth. Find him. Ethan's breath caught, his mind flashing to the courtroom, to the memory card in Rex's collar, and he realized his ally had been planning this. using Rex as a vessel. Knowing Ethan's bond with him was the key. As the guards led him to the transport van, his wrists cuffed, his body aching, Ethan's eyes burned with a new fire, not just for freedom, but for Rex, for the truth, for the war he now knew he'd been fighting all along. A war that stretched beyond Vauban, beyond the alley, into a darkness he was only beginning to see. Ethan Cole's boots crunched on the frost-covered gravel, his breath fogging in the pre-dawn chill as he crouched behind a rusted chain-link fence, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and resolve, his eyes fixed on the sprawling compound ahead, a fortress of concrete and barbed wire, its floodlights casting harsh beams across the desolate landscape, a place no one called a farm. The anonymous notes from prison, those cryptic lifelines, had led him here, to a facility north of the city, where Rex, his canine German shepherd, was being held, not retired but caged, his instincts dulled or twisted by the same forces that had framed Ethan for murder. 2 weeks had passed since the courtroom upheaval, since Rex's barks in that memory card had shattered Ethan's conviction, exposing James Vaughn's betrayal. But freedom was a hollow gift when Ethan knew Rex was still a prisoner, and the organization behind Vaughn, whispered as Argent, was still watching. Their reach a shadow Ethan felt in every stranger's glance, every too quiet night. He'd spent those weeks tracking leads, calling in old favors, piecing together rumors from ex-cops and street informants, until a grainy photo, slipped under his motel door, showed Rex, thinner, scarred, chained in a kennel, his amber eyes dulled but unbroken. Ethan's resolve hardened, his prison scars itching under his jacket, and now under a moonless sky. He was here, a ghost in black, armed only with bolt cutters, a knife, and a burning need to bring Rex home. The compound was a maze of low buildings, its perimeter patrolled by armed guards, their radios crackling, their dogs, trained but not like Rex, sniffing the air. Ethan's training kicked in, his movements silent, his breath steady as he clipped a section of fence, slipping through, his eyes scanning for cameras, his ears straining for footsteps. The notes had warned of a lab, a place where dogs were broken, and Ethan's stomach churned at the thought of Rex, loyal, fierce, the partner who'd carried the truth, reduced to a tool or worse. He reached a side door, its lock rusted but stubborn, and as he worked the bolt cutters, a guard rounded the corner, his flashlight beam slicing the dark, grazing Ethan's sleeve. Ethan dropped flat, his pulse hammering, the guard's boots inches away, but Rex's low growl, faint but unmistakable, echoed from a nearby building, and Ethan's heart leapt. Rex was close, alive, fighting. The guard moved on, and Ethan slipped inside, the air thick with antiseptic and fear, the corridor lined with steel cages, dogs whimpering or silent, their eyes hollow. Rex's kennel was at the end, his massive frame curled in a corner, his fur matted, a chain tethering him to the wall, but his head snapped up, his eyes meeting Ethan's, a spark of recognition igniting as he lunged, the chain snapping taut, his bark hoarse but fierce. Ethan's hands shook as he cut the lock, whispering, "I'm here, boy." But the reunion was cut short by shouts, guards, alerted by a tripped sensor, their boots pounding closer, their radios blaring. Ethan freed Rex, the dog's weight leaning into him, weaker but unbowed, and they bolted, Ethan's knife flashing as a guard lunged, the blade grazing the man's arm, buying them seconds. Alarms wailed, floodlights blinding, and Ethan's lungs burned as they sprinted through a storage room. Rex's instincts guiding them past crates of medical supplies, where Ethan's eyes caught a folder, stamped Argent, spilling photos of himself, Rex and others, targets, dates, locations, proof the organization hadn't stopped watching. He stuffed it into his jacket, his mind racing. But a guard's shout, "There!" and the crack of a gunshot forced them into a service tunnel. Its walls slick, its air stale. Rex growled, his limp noticeable, but his pace relentless. leading Ethan through the dark, their bond a beacon as bullets ricocheted behind them. They emerged into a drainage ditch, the compound's lights fading, but Ethan's relief was fleeting. A guard's dog, a snarling Doberman, charged, and Rex met it head-on, teeth clashing, fur flying, giving Ethan time to climb the bank, his hands pulling Rex free as the Doberman yelped, retreating. They ran, the forest swallowing them, until the sirens faded and Ethan collapsed, his arms around Rex, their breaths ragged, the folder's contents burning in his mind. Argent wasn't just a name, it was a machine, and they were still in its sights. Days later, in a rural town far from the city, Ethan leased a patch of land, its barns and fields a perfect front for a dog training camp, a place to rebuild, to hide. Rex, though scarred and lean, grew stronger, his growls sharper, his eyes scanning the horizon, as if he knew the folder's secrets, names, plans. A network that stretched beyond Vaughn meant danger was coming. Ethan trained strays by day, his nights spent studying the documents, his sleep haunted by the facility's cages, by the guards' radios, by the certainty that Argent's eyes were everywhere. Rex slept by his side, his warmth a reminder of what they'd survived. But when a twig snapped outside one night, Rex's hackles rose, his growl a warning, and Ethan gripped his knife, knowing their new life was a fragile shield against the storm still brewing. The sun dipped below the rolling hills, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet. But for Ethan Cole, the quiet of his dog training camp felt like the hush before a storm, a fragile peace that masked the danger he knew was closing in. 3 months had passed since his desperate escape with Rex from the Argent facility. 3 months of building this haven in a sleepy rural town, its barns and fields alive with the barks of strays he'd taken in. Their trust a slow victory against the scars of his past. Rex, his canine German shepherd, prowled the perimeter, his fur regaining its sheen, his limp gone, but his amber eyes never rested, scanning the tree line. His growls a constant reminder of the folder Ethan kept hidden in a locked drawer. Argent's documents, a chilling ledger of targets, including his own name. Proof that the organization behind James Vaughn's betrayal was still hunting them. Ethan trained dogs by day, teaching them to sit, to guard, his voice steady for the locals who brought their pets. But his nights were spent poring over the folder, its cryptic notes and surveillance photos a puzzle he couldn't solve alone. The camp was his sanctuary, his cover, but the illusion of safety shattered when the first sign appeared. A puppy, a scrappy terrier named Scout, found limp in her kennel, her food laced with a bitter poison Ethan recognized from his cop days, a toxin meant to kill quietly. His stomach churned, his hands shaking as he buried Scout, Rex pacing beside him, his nose low, sniffing the earth, his growl a warning that this was no accident. Ethan installed cameras, motion sensors, his prison-honed instincts screaming of a threat closer than the distant city. But the next blow came faster. His cameras went dark, their wires slashed, their lenses smeared with mud, and footprints, too large for a stray, circled the barn, vanishing into the woods. Rex's barks grew sharper, his patrols relentless, and Ethan's sleep dwindled. His knife never far, his eyes darting to every shadow, every creak of the old farmhouse. The locals, kind but curious, noticed his tension, their questions about his past, his scars, the camp's high fences, probing too deeply. And Ethan wondered who among them might be watching, reporting, waiting. A week later, the final straw snapped. Rex, sniffing the barn's rafters, froze, his hackles rising, his teeth bared as he clawed at a wooden beam, dislodging a tiny device, its red light blinking. A micro, military grade, its signal strong enough to reach miles. Ethan's blood ran cold, his fingers crushing the device, his mind racing. Who planted it, and how long had they been listening? He swept the camp, finding 2 more micros, one in his office, another near the kennels, their presence a violation that turned his haven into a trap. Rex's growls didn't stop, his gaze fixed on the road, where a delivery truck lingered too long. Its driver a stranger whose face Ethan couldn't place. The folder's photos flashed in his mind. Argent's targets, their lives mapped like chess moves. And Ethan knew this was their work, a warning that he'd never outrun them. He called in a favor from Torres, the prison guard who'd slipped him that first clue, now retired. His voice tense over a burner phone. "They're tightening the net. Cole, someone close is talking." Ethan's suspicion turned inward, to the handful of allies he'd trusted, a local vet who'd treated Rex, a hardware store owner who'd sold him cameras, even a drifter named Lila who'd started helping with the punks. Her stories of a rough past too polished, her glances too sharp. Lila's arrival had coincided with Scout's death, her habit of wandering the woods at dusk now a red flag. But Ethan had no proof, only Rex's unease, his growls spiking whenever she approached. He confronted her one evening, his voice low, his hand on Rex's collar, her eyes flickering with something, fear, guilt, before she laughed it off, claiming she was just a wanderer. But Rex's snarl cut through her words, and she left the next day, her departure too sudden, her backpack too heavy. Ethan's paranoia grew, his nights spent patrolling with Rex, their bond a lifeline as the camp's peace unraveled. A new clue emerged when Ethan found a scrap of paper in the barn, slipped under a feed bag, its scrawl matching the prison notes. "They know you have the folder. Run." His heart pounded, his mind flashing to the courtroom, to the memory card in Rex's collar, to the shadow at the door, and he realized his unseen ally was still out there, risking everything to warn him. Rex's barks woke him that night, shrill and urgent, and Ethan grabbed his knife, rushing to the kennels, where a figure cloaked in black, a syringe in hand, froze under Rex's glare, then bolted, vanishing into the woods before Ethan could pursue. The syringe's contents matched Scout's poison, and Ethan's rage flared, his resolve hardening. He wouldn't run. Not again. He rigged traps, reinforced the fences, and trained Rex to patrol tighter, their days a dance of vigilance, their nights a war against the unseen. The camp was no longer a haven but a battlefield, and as Ethan studied the folder's last page, a list of names, one circled. Lila Kane, he knew the enemy was closer than he'd feared, and Rex's growls, now a constant hymn, were the only truth he could trust. The wind howled through the pines surrounding Ethan Cole's dog training camp, carrying the scent of rain and something sharper, like danger, as Ethan stood in the barn's doorway, his hand on Rex's collar, the K9 German Shepherd's low growl vibrating against his palm, both of them staring at the dirt road where a battered sedan idled, its headlights cutting through the dusk. 3 days had passed since the syringe incident, since Ethan's discovery of Lila Kane's name in Argent's folder, and the camp was a fortress now, cameras rewired, traps set, Rex patrolling like a sentinel. But the air was thick with the certainty that the enemy was closing in. The sedan's door creaked open, and a figure stepped out, his silhouette familiar yet wrong, like a memory twisted by betrayal. Mark Hensley, Ethan's former partner, the man who'd sold him out in that alley 2 years ago, his lie sealing Ethan's conviction. Mark's face was gaunt, his eyes shadowed, his hands raised in surrender, a manila envelope clutched in one, his voice hoarse as he called, "Ethan, we need to talk." "Alone, eh?" Rex's growl deepened, his hackles rising, and Ethan's grip tightened, his knife sheathed but close, his pulse hammering with a mix of rage and caution. "You've got 10 seconds before Rex tears you apart," Ethan said, his voice ice, and Mark nodded, tossing the envelope at Ethan's feet, its contents spilling. A photo, grainy but unmistakable, showing James Vaughn, Ethan's traitorous captain, shaking hands with suited men in a dimly lit room, their faces obscured but their power palpable. "There's more," Mark said, his eyes darting to the woods. "But not here." "They're listening." Ethan's mind raced, the folder's warnings echoing, Argent, Inner Circle, Trust no one, and he snatched the envelope, finding a USB drive nestled inside, its weight a promise of answers or a trap. Rex's barks exploded, his body lunging as a twig snapped in the tree line, and Mark flinched, his fear raw, whispering, "They followed me. We need to move." Ethan didn't trust Mark. Couldn't. But Rex's focus on the woods, his teeth bared, was a signal Ethan couldn't ignore. And he nodded, grabbing a flashlight, his knife now in hand, as they sprinted toward the forest, Rex leading, his nose low, tracking a scent Ethan couldn't see. The trees closed around them, their branches clawing, the air heavy with damp earth and menace. And Ethan's questions burned. Why Mark? Why now? What was on the USB? Mark's breath was ragged, his words tumbling. I didn't know how deep it went. Argent, they own half the force. The card in Rex's collar? I planted it 2 years ago when I thought I could fix things. Ethan's blood boiled, his fist itching to strike. But Mark's next words stopped him. They threatened my family. Ethan. I had no choice. The confession was a gut punch. But before Ethan could respond, headlights pierced the forest. A black SUV crashing through underbrush, its engine roaring. And Ethan realized Mark hadn't come alone. Argent had sent hunters. Rex spun, his barks a war cry, and Ethan dove behind a fallen log, pulling Mark down. The SUV's doors slamming as armed men fanned out, their radios crackling, their flashlights slicing the dark. Ethan's training kicked in, his movements silent, his knife ready. But Mark's panic was a liability, his whispers frantic. The USB, it's got names, accounts, proof Argent runs Vaughn and others. Ethan's mind flashed to the courtroom, to the shadow at the door, and he knew this was bigger than Vaughn, bigger than Mark's betrayal. Rex's growl shifted, his body darting left, drawing the men's fire. And Ethan seized the moment, tackling one, his knife slashing the man's radio, silencing his call. Mark scrambled up, running, but a shot rang out, and he grunted, clutching his side, blood seeping through his fingers as he staggered into the trees. Ethan cursed, dragging Mark behind a boulder, Rex circling back, his teeth snapping at a second man, who screamed, dropping his gun. The SUV's engine revved, its lights blinding, and Ethan's flashlight caught a face. Lila Kane, the drifter, in the driver's seat, her eyes cold, her betrayal confirmed. Ethan's rage flared, but survival came first, and he hauled Mark deeper into the forest, Rex clearing a path, his instincts razor sharp despite the chaos. The USB burned in Ethan's pocket, its secrets a weight he couldn't lose. And as they reached a ravine, Mark's voice weakened, his blood staining the leaves. Get it to Torres, he's clean. Ethan nodded, his anger softening, knowing Mark's betrayal had cost him too. And as the men closed in, Ethan pushed Mark into a hollow, whispering, stay alive, before bolting with Rex. The ravines sloped treacherous, their escape a desperate gamble. Gunfire echoed, branches snapping, but Rex's speed outpaced the hunters, his growls guiding Ethan to a stream, its icy water masking their scent. They emerged, soaked and battered, in a clearing miles from the camp, the SUV's lights distant but relentless. Ethan clutched the USB. The photo crumpled in his jacket, and Rex's warm bulk pressed against him. Their bond unbroken, their fight far from over. Mark's fate was uncertain. Lila's role a new wound, but the USB's promise of names, of proof, lit a fire in Ethan's chest. And as Rex's ears pricked, catching a far-off engine, Ethan knew Argent was coming, and he'd be ready. Ethan Cole's breath burned in his lungs as he crouched in the shadows of a derelict warehouse, its skeletal frame looming under a starless sky, the air thick with the tang of rust and diesel. His eyes locked on the fortified compound beyond, a concrete fortress where Argent's secrets were buried. And James Vaughn, the man who'd framed him, held court. Rex, his K9 German Shepherd, pressed against his side, his growl a low rumble, his amber eyes glinting with the same resolve that had carried them through prison, through betrayal, through the forest chase that left Mark Hensley bleeding and Lila Kane exposed as Argent's pawn. The USB from Mark's envelope, now tucked in Ethan's jacket, had revealed a chilling truth. Argent wasn't just a criminal network, it was a machine of power, buying cops, judges, and politicians, with Vaughn as its trusted enforcer. In this compound, a hub of servers, files, and dirty money was the key to dismantling it. Ethan's fingers tightened around his knife, his heart pounding with the weight of the folder's photos, the courtroom memory card, and Mark's dying plea to get the evidence to Torres, the one clean ally Ethan had left. The compound was a death trap, its perimeter wired with cameras, its guards armed with rifles. But Ethan had no choice. Argent knew he had the USB, knew he was coming, and the camp, his sanctuary, was no longer safe. He'd slipped away at midnight, leaving a decoy to fool Lila's spies. And now, Durant, with Rex's instincts guiding him, he was here, ready to end it or die trying. The plan was simple. Infiltrate, find the server room, download proof of Argent's crimes, and get out before Vaughn's men closed the net. Ethan cut through a rusted gate, Rex silent at his heels. Their movements a dance of precision honed by years of trust, the dog's nose catching scents of gun oil and sweat. The compound's interior was a maze of corridors, its walls lined with crates stamped with cryptic codes, its air humming with the buzz of generators. Ethan's flashlight flickered, revealing a guard's shadow, and he pressed against a wall. Rex's body tense, waiting for his signal. The guard passed, and Ethan moved, slipping into a control room, its monitors glowing with feeds of the camp. His home. Proof Argent had never stopped watching. His stomach churned, but the USB's data had pointed here, to a server vault, and Ethan hacked the lock. His prison-learned skills clumsy but enough. The door hissing open to reveal racks of humming drives, their lights a constellation of secrets. Rex's growl spiked, his ears pinned, and Ethan froze as footsteps echoed. Vaughn, his voice sharp, barking orders to secure the vault. Ethan's blood ran cold, his knife useless against Vaughn's rifle. But Rex was a blur, darting into the corridor, his barks drawing the guard's fire, giving Ethan seconds to plug the USB into a drive, its download bar crawling as shouts and gunfire erupted outside. The vault's walls shook, a low rumble growing, and Ethan's heart sank. Argent had rigged the place to blow, a fail-safe to bury their tracks. He yanked the USB, its download incomplete but enough, and sprinted, the corridor a chaos of smoke and screams. Rex's barks guiding him through the haze. A guard lunged, his rifle raised, but Rex tackled him, teeth sinking into flesh. The man's cry cut short as Ethan kicked the weapon away. Vaughn's voice roared, "Cole, you're dead!" And a bullet grazed Ethan's shoulder, pain searing. But Rex was there, leaping at Vaughn, his jaws clamping the man's arm, dragging him down. The rumble grew, the ceiling cracking, and Ethan stumbled, blood soaking his sleeve, his vision blurring as he pulled Rex free. Vaughn's curses fading under the groan of collapsing steel. They dove through a shattered window, the explosion's heat singeing their backs, the compound erupting in a fireball that lit the night, debris raining as Ethan and Rex rolled into a ditch, their breaths ragged, the USB clutched in Ethan's bloodied hand. Sirens wailed, distant but closing, and Ethan's eyes caught movement. Federal agents, led by Torres, storming the wreckage, their shouts a blur as they secured the site. Vaughn's crumpled form dragged from the rubble, alive but broken. Ethan handed Torres the USB, its data, names, accounts, Argent's inner circle, enough to spark raids across the city. But as agents swarmed, Ethan's gaze lingered on a figure in the tree line, too still, too deliberate, vanishing before he could focus. Torres' voice was grim. "We got Vaughn, but someone's still pulling strings." Ethan nodded, his shoulder throbbing, Rex's warm bulk grounding him. The dog's growl a confirmation that the real mastermind, Argent's true head, was still out there, untouched by the flames. The feds took Vaughn, the USB sparking arrests. But Ethan's relief was fleeting. The folder's photos flashing in his mind, the names he hadn't yet traced. The certainty that this victory was a battle, not the war. Rex's ears pricked, his nose sniffing the air, and Ethan knew they'd return to the camp. Rebuild. Prepare. Because Argent's shadow was long, and the figure in the trees was a promise of fights to come. As dawn broke, painting the wreckage in gold, Ethan stroked Rex's fur, whispering, "We're not done, boy." His resolve a fire that no explosion could snuff out. The morning sun bathed Ethan Cole's dog training camp in a golden glow, its fields alive with the playful barks of rescued strays, their wagging tails a stark contrast to the scars Ethan still carried, both on his body and in his heart, 6 months after the fiery collapse of Argent's compound. The rural town had embraced the camp, now a bustling rescue and rehabilitation center, its barns filled with dogs saved from streets or worse, each one a testament to Ethan's vow to rebuild, to give purpose to the pain of 2 years lost to a prison cell and a betrayal that nearly broke him. Rex, his canine German shepherd, stood sentinel at the gate, his fur gleaming, his limp gone, his amber eyes scanning the horizon with a vigilance that never wavered. A hero whose barks had shattered a courtroom lie and sparked a chain of raids that crippled Argent's network. The town's annual fair had honored them, pinning medals on Ethan's jacket and a ribbon on Rex's collar. The crowd's cheers a fleeting balm for the nights Ethan still woke, sweating, the echo of Vaughn's gunfire or the compound's explosion ringing in his ears. The USB's data, handed to Torres, had led to dozens of arrests, cops, lawyers, even a senator. Argent's tendrils severed, its soldiers scattered. But Ethan knew, as Rex's growls often reminded him, that the head of the snake remained, a mastermind whose name wasn't on any list, whose shadow lingered in every too quiet moment. The camp was thriving, its kennels full, its classes booked with locals eager to train their pets, and Ethan found a rhythm, teaching dogs to heel, to guard, his voice steady, his hands gentle, a far cry from the cop who'd once chased shadows in alleys. He'd hired a small team, vetted carefully, their loyalty earned through shared sweat and long days, and the camp became a beacon, a place where broken things found healing, much like Ethan himself. Rex was the heart of it, his presence calming the most skittish rescues, his instincts guiding Ethan through decisions, from which dogs to save to which strangers to watch. The townsfolk loved Rex, their kids sneaking him treats, their stories of his courage spreading. But Ethan saw the truth in Rex's eyes, a wariness, a readiness, as if he knew the peace was borrowed. That truth arrived on a crisp autumn evening, as Ethan locked the barn, Rex at his side, the air sharp with the scent of fallen leaves. A woman approached, older, her face weathered, her coat patched, her hands clutching a sealed envelope, her eyes darting as she whispered, "You don't know me, but you need this." Ethan's pulse quickened, his hand on Rex's collar, the dog's growl low but fierce, his body tensing as the woman stepped closer, her voice urgent. "They're not done. Check the symbol." She thrust the envelope into his hands and vanished into the dusk, her footsteps fading before Ethan could call out. Rex's barks followed her, sharp, insistent, and Ethan's gut twisted, the weight of the envelope familiar, like the prison notes that had kept him alive. Inside was a single sheet, its ink fresh, a symbol scrawled at the top, a coiled snake, the same one etched in Argent's folder, beside a cryptic warning, "The head lives, trust the dough." Ethan's breath caught, his mind flashing to the compound, to the figure in the tree line, to Lila Kane's cold stare, and he knew this was no hoax. Argent's mastermind was out there, regrouping, watching. Rex's growl didn't stop, his gaze fixed on the road, where a man lingered, his cap low, his posture too still, and Ethan's knife was in his hand before he realized. The stranger slipping away as headlights flashed in the distance. The camp was no longer a refuge but a target, and Ethan's resolve hardened. He'd protect it, protect Rex, protect the life they'd built. He called Torres, now a federal consultant, his voice steady as he relayed the note, the symbol, the stranger, and Torres's reply was grim. "We're digging, but Argent's roots are deep. Stay sharp." Ethan did, rigging new alarms, training Rex to patrol tighter. His team briefed to watch for oddities, their trust in him unwavering. The camp's mission grew, partnering with shelters, saving more dogs, its name spreading. And Ethan found strength in its purpose, in the dog's loyalty, in Rex's unyielding courage. A local reporter wrote their story. The headline, "Hero Cop and Canine Rebuild Lives," a nod to their fight. And Ethan let himself hope, let himself smile, teaching a shy husky to trust, watching Rex play with a litter of pups, their joy a shield against the fear. But the note stayed with him, taped to his desk, its snake symbol a reminder that peace was fragile. One morning, as Ethan fed the dogs, Rex froze, his growl a blade, his eyes locked on a delivery van, its driver a stranger whose hands lingered too long on a package. Ethan approached, his voice calm, his knife hidden, and the driver's eyes flickered, a coiled snake tattoo peeking from his sleeve before he sped off, leaving a chill Ethan couldn't shake. He opened the package, finding a blank card, its back stamped with the same symbol, and Rex's barks echoed, a call to arms. Ethan stood, his jaw set, Rex at his side, their bond a fortress against the coming storm. The camp was their home, their fight, and though Argent's shadow loomed, Ethan was ready, his heart steady, his purpose clear. With Rex, he'd face whatever came, not as a cop, but as a man who'd learned to trust the bees who'd never failed him. From a canine's barks exposing a corrupt cop to a veteran's redemption, Ethan and Rex's saga gripped us. Thanks for listening. Like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling tales. Hit the bell for notifications and join our next adventure.